You're listening to the Energy Hour, sponsored by BlueRock Energy on News Radio 570 WSYR, now on 106.9 FM.
Welcome to the BlueRock Energy Hour. I'm Dave Anthony here with BlueRock President and CEO Phil Van Horn. Big show today. We'll be having a chat with Tim Butler, brewmaster of Empire Brewing Company, and today live in studio, John Katko. John, former federal prosecutor with the Organized Crime Division, so real stuff. 24th Congressional District candidate for Congress. Thank you so much for being here, John. Anything I missed?
No, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Yes, good morning, John. It's great to have you here. We're going to talk about energy issues, especially the energy issues that affect the entire country. There aren't too many issues that are more important to all of us as citizens of the United States than energy. It's what it takes for us to live, to move, to heat our homes, cook our food, move our vehicles, and there are so many issues. And if you're successful in your run for Congress, there's no question that energy policy and energy issues certainly will be coming in front of you as a member of Congress.
No question about that, and I think energy issues have really kind of dominated the American landscape for the last several decades, both domestically and internationally. So I'm glad to be here and glad to engage in the discussion.
Yes, and if the listeners would like, Dave, can you give the phone number that they can call in with questions?
Yes, you can call us live right now for 421-9797, 421-9797, 570 WSYR.
And we're on Twitter. If you send to my Twitter account, we will respond via the Twitter feed. It's at P. Van Horn with an E. And we'd love to hear from our Twitter followers and those on iHeartRadio that want to contact us, like we had a couple last week call or tweet in, rather, off the iHeart. We're here to answer you.
Very good.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on in the hydrofracking area. That's been a national debate, John. As everybody knows, hydrofracking is banned in New York State, but in other states such as Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Dakota, Montana, there's been a great revolution in drilling. It's moved the United States now. We're the number 3 producer of crude oil, just behind Russia and Saudi Arabia. So from a national security standpoint, the hydrofracking developments have really had an impact, both economically, but also I think the national security impact is one that doesn't get talked about much. And I think as a member of Congress, certainly national security will be high on your list of issues.
Yeah, of course it would be. And when any talk about energy in general, it has to be absolutely intertwined with national security because they go hand in hand. I mean, look at our concentration and our focus and the effort and the blood and treasure that's spent by the United States in the last decade alone in the Middle East. I mean, it would be a different thing if oil wasn't such a factor. So, of course, it's going to be no matter what discussion you have of national energy policy, it has to be, you have to talk about foreign policy at the same time. So definitely the two go hand in hand.
Yes, and there was a large article in the Wall Street Journal this week regarding the ban on the U.S. exporting crude that, of course, goes back to the 1975 era of the Arab oil embargo, when OPEC really became a player in the world stage. And in order to try and decrease the volatility in gasoline prices, the theory was we'd ban exports of crude oil. There's a lot of debate on whether that ever worked or not. But regardless, now that we do have a surplus, just this week was the first export of crude oil from, I think it was out of New Orleans, actually. And it was a loophole in the law they found. And it doesn't seem to make sense to me that oil companies need to find a loophole to do the right thing for the U.S. economy.
No, I think you're right. I mean, ever since I was a child, the one headline I always remembered from an economic standpoint, even when I was very young, was the trade deficit. The trade deficit is gigantic, and I think it's always been driven by our consumption of foreign oil and foreign energy products. And I think now that we're really doing such a good job in the oil production area and the gas production area that we may end up being a net exporter of natural resources for fuel. And if we ever get to that point, it's imagine how much of a game changer it would be for us on the international scene. I mean, if we were supplying, Europe with natural gas instead of Russia, for example, what a difference that would make for us as far as how we deal with Russia and how our foreign relations are dealt with. And of course, the less we rely on foreign oil and the less we rely on the Middle East to get our foreign oil, the better off we're going to be in the long term from both a strategic and a military standpoint, no doubt about it.
And the economic impact is not minor either. It will lead to a stronger dollar, lower interest rates, or we're already in low interest rates. It can help continue that as we improve that trade deficit, like you said, that you and I have been hearing about our entire lives, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I'd like to talk about is how we get to that point. And how are we going to do that? How are we as a country going to be able to get to that point and balance that with the environmental concerns that are out there? And that's probably the real discussion. If we ever learn to balance the environmental concerns with the practical and economic concerns that we have with respect to energy, I think we would be in a really good spot as a country economically.
Yes, and I think the producing companies, the oil companies, the guys that are actually doing the drilling, in my experience, are very, very environmentally aware, very, very environmentally friendly. They do everything they can to protect the environment. And one of the things I've told groups I've talked to is that business is about people. It's not about big, giant companies. It's about people. And when you meet the people that work for the oil companies and that are actually out on the drilling fields, they're very, very environmentally aware. They don't cut corners. They don't do bad things. And even the EPA, which is not exactly known as a business-friendly organization, I'm from the Department of the Government, their studies have even shown that the hydrofracking has proven to be safe. They did the big study on the alleged water contamination in western Pennsylvania and found out that it was unrelated to the hydrofracking. So I think that the track record is really pretty good.
Yeah, I think it overall it is. I understand that there's environmental concerns with respect to hydrofracking, and right now, as you noted at the beginning of our conversation, hydrofracking in the United States in New York State, is banned right now. And there is a study that, from what I understand, is complete, but has not been released by the state. So this discussion we're having really is more of a theoretical one, because we need to hear from the state, and why they're not disclosing what that discussion, that report indicates, I don't know. But whether or not that report says fracking is good or is going to be allowed in New York State is really what we need to know going forward. One thing we need to know is that we're sitting on an awful lot of gas here in New York State in the Marcellus Shale, an awful lot. And from an economic standpoint, it can make a real difference. And you see the states like North Dakota and Pennsylvania that have allowed fracking. It's had a huge impact on the people and their economics. Now, of course, on the environmental side, you got to make sure it's safe. You absolutely positively have to make sure it's safe, and that's what I'm looking forward to hearing from that report.
Yes, I think as taxpayers, we all paid for that report, and as a taxpayer, it's kind of annoying that we don't know what's in there. And you're right certainly on the economic impact. This winter, by not having local natural gas, by not having the proper natural gas pipelines in place, all of us as energy customers in our homes and businesses paid the price this winter with very high energy prices. And maybe it couldn't have been totally eliminated, but it certainly could have been lessened had we had local natural gas and had the pipelines in place to get that gas really to where it's needed. Dave, I think we have a caller on the line.
Yes, we're about 2 minutes to break, so what I'm thinking, maybe we can take our break now, and if you've got another 10 minutes, we could take a couple calls if you're available, and we could...
I'll be here as long as you want me to be here.
Okay.
Okay, this is great. Why don't we take the break, and we'll pick up the caller as soon as we come out of the break. And again, we'd love to hear from you on Twitter as well, at P. Van Horn with an E.
This is the Blue Rock Energy Hour on News Radio 570 WSYR.
This is the Energy Hour on News Radio 570 WSYR, now on 106.9 FM.
Welcome back to the Blue Rock Energy Hour. We're here with former federal prosecutor John Katko, 24th Congressional District candidate, here to talk energy with Blue Rock President and CEO Phil Van Horn. And we have Jeff from Cato would like to know John Katko's views on energy diversification. So, Jeff, Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Good morning, Jeff.
Actually, I'm a native Houstonian from living in the town of Oswego, so try that one on for size. The reason why I wanted to call was, first of all, the 24th District, who's the current office holder now?
Yes, our current congressman right now is Dan Maffei.
Okay.
And I just want to say, just before we jump in here, that we did invite Congressman Maffei on the show today, and he declined. So we did offer him the chance to also participate and share his views on the most important topic of energy.
So is there an energy question here? I would love to have you ask an energy question. If not, we have other forums for political questions.
Well, obviously, the understand that it does matter in regards to the party, because the politics of energy seems to overwhelm the good of the people, the whole of the people, in regards to what should be and what shouldn't be, drilled or fracked or renewable energy, etc. But my question really is to the candidate is that how do you feel in general about energy diversification in regards to your being a Republican conservative in a sense of what's good for the whole of the people?
Okay, I got you. I understand the question. Let me answer it for you as best I can. I believe that we do have to have energy diversification in the United States, and quite frankly, we have that right now. We have wind power, we have solar, we have hydropower, we have nuclear, we have geothermal, we have biomass, we have clean coal, we have American-made oil, and we have natural gas. You can't possibly get more diverse than that. The question is, how do we deal with these resources in a way that is great for our economy, is great for Americans, but through a way of cheaper prices for their fuel, and at the same time satisfy the environmental aspects.
All right. Thank you very much for your question. We're going to move on to Bill, who has a geothermal question. Hi, Bill.
Hi.
Good morning, Bill.
How are
Good
you?
morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Happy to hear from you.
I've researched geothermal, and I put it in, to tell you the truth, but I haven't gone through a winter yet, and I thought it was the way to go. What do you think about it?
Well, I got a friend of mine who just built a house, and it's heated by geothermal technology, and it's I don't understand it enough to know how it all works. All I know is it worked in his house because he was in the Adirondacks and it was nice and warm in the middle of winter. But I think that's another innovative way that we're accessing ways to keep our families warm and give them energy. But I think you might be able to talk more about it, Phil.
Yes, I think that any of the locally produced energy sources, whether it's locally produced natural gas, geothermal, such as Bill is doing at his home, are all great. We saw this winter that when prices went up and we were importing our gas from other places, the prices went up. So the closer to home we can develop energy sources for our homes and businesses, whether or not it's solar, rooftop, local windmills, geothermal, etc., those are all going to improve our energy security, reduce the prices and the impact long term. At BlueRock, we're proud to offer a very good renewable energy product in that we buy all New York State generated renewable sources. So when you buy renewable energy through, or green energy, however you prefer to refer to it, through BlueRock, we're reinvesting those dollars locally. And I think Bill's example of a local geothermal well is along the same vein. So I think it's great that you're doing that.
All right.
I appreciate your answer, and I appreciate your conservatism.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
We appreciate your listenership.
Yes.
All right. We're here with John Katko. He is a former federal prosecutor, Organized Crime Division. I'm sure we could talk stories about that, or maybe we shouldn't.
Well, the first thing we should have done is ask Bill if he appreciates me enough to vote for me.
He's nodding his head yes. I saw that on our link.
Okay, as we move forward, one of the things, and John and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, is the issue of building infrastructure to move the gas that is and oil in this case, that is being produced in the northern part of the Midwest. And one of the national issues that certainly will come in front of Congress, and is in front of Congress now, is approval of the Keystone Pipeline. And that's been delayed for a few years now for a large number of reasons. And as we've talked about on prior shows, one of the consequences of not building the Keystone Pipeline is the oil is being produced, and it's actually coming through Syracuse. And there's somewhere around 3 trains per day, 100 train cars per day, rolling down the tracks about a mile from the studios that we're sitting in now. And I think there's about 70,000 barrels of oil on each train, and 3 times a day. That's a lot of oil coming through Syracuse. So what they're doing is loading that oil in North Dakota on those trains, bringing it south around the lakes through Erie, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, and offloading that oil at the Port of Albany. And it doesn't seem to me to make much sense to be transporting that oil, which, let's face it, crude oil is a corrosive compound. It's a dangerous chemical. It doesn't make much sense to be transporting that on the surface by rail when there's an underground pipeline alternative.
Well, I think what you touched on is just one aspect of it, but the Keystone Pipeline in general is a real head scratcher for me, because what it's basically designed to do, if I understand it correctly, is to transport the oil from the Canadian tar sands. And am I right there?
It's from the Canadian tar sands and the Bakken oil reserves in the United States. So it's actually both sources. Many people like to focus on the Canadian tar sands because just the word tar sands kind of sounds bad and dangerous, and it gins up this image of something terrible.
Right, I understand. But the bottom line is that it is designed to get the oil to the Gulf refineries. Am I correct?
That's okay. Correct. The refineries we have are mostly, they're either on the East Coast, they're in the New Jersey, Delaware corridor, or down in the Gulf of Mexico. And given that we aren't building new refineries in the United States, but the sources of the oil have changed, we now have to get that crude to where it can be refined.
Right. And this would just basically add to our energy independence and of course, decrease dramatically our reliance on Middle Eastern and foreign oil. Having a close partnership with our Canadian brothers to the north, brothers and sisters to the north, I think would be a great thing. And it's an economic, it would have a huge economic impact for us. I mean, it seems like roughly 700,000 barrels a day, I think is a figure I saw, would be imported through the Keystone Pipeline and refined in the United States. 700,000 barrels is a lot of oil per day. And it generate, the latest figures that I saw were about 42,000 jobs in the United States, just from an economic standpoint. Now, from an environmental standpoint, you pointed out a big thing. The oil we get here has to be transported some way to the local markets. And if it's coming through a highly populated area like central New York, in fact, that train goes by my campaign office. I could literally reach out and touch it. It's right behind us. And to me, that's a big danger. And when we talk about trying to satisfy the economic interests on one side and the environmental interests on the other side, sometimes we don't take into account some of the dangers of transporting it by ways other than pipeline. Now, the bottom line is Canada's sick and tired of waiting for us. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but they passed something in their legislature where they're going to agree to build a pipeline to the West Coast. And China is going to be accessing that oil. So instead of the United States getting cheaper oil in a safe manner, creating tens of thousands of jobs, we're going to let China take it, and China's a much worse polluter of the environment than we could ever hope of being. And they're going to take that oil, and they're going to burn it, and they're going to pollute the environment, and it's going to cost us more. And that's why it's such a head-scratcher for me. President Obama has delayed a decision on the pipeline until after the election, which I suspect means that he's probably going to approve it, but it might be too late because the legislature or the parliament in Canada has already passed a law allowing it to be built to the West Coast. Now, it hasn't started yet, so I'm hoping we're not too late. But I think in a total mix of things, from an environmental standpoint as well as an economic standpoint, it's a no-brainer.
Yes, and exporting our oil to China, I agree with you, makes no sense at all. And it's both from a pollution standpoint, environmental impact standpoint, but from the people I've talked to that have been in factories and mines and power plants in China, the safety record there, especially compared to the United States, is horrible.
It's horrible. Well, if you look in Beijing alone, mean, remember in the Olympics, they had, they were concerned so much about the air quality that people were wearing masks. I mean, there's times in Beijing where you can't even go outside. It's so bad, the air pollution. I mean, we have a long way to go to be where we need to be in the United States, probably, but from a pollution standpoint, but we're a far sight better than China could ever hope of being. And I think that the Keystone Pipeline would be a really good thing for us to have in the United States, and it's a far safer alternative to transporting fuel in the United States.
I want to thank John Katko. He is the 24th Congressional District candidate for Congress. So happy that you were here today. We hope to talk to you again in the future. Good luck.
Thank you very much, and I'll come back anytime you'd like. And if I just may do one quick plug, if you could check us out on Facebook or at our website, johnkatkoforcongress.com, you'll constantly get updates on our campaign, and you'll see all the issues that where we stand on them.
That's fantastic.
Yes. Thank you very much for coming on, John. It's been great. It's been great to get to know you a little bit and to have you and be able to have a little discussion here for a few minutes on energy issues. Thank you again.
No problem. I'll be back anytime you like, gentlemen.
You're listening to the Blue Rock Energy Hour on News Radio 570 WSYR. Now on.